AAPI group has asked me to tell a little bit about my story, how my family and I came to America, and basically how I got to TPD today. So all started back in 1979 when I was about 7 years old. My parents woke me up in the middle of the night, and being 7 years old, I was playing during the day with my friends, and middle of the night was awakened. Not even sure what time it was. I know it was dark. We boarded a bus and we rode a bus to somewhere in the countryside in southern Vietnam, and we didn't get to our destination until pretty late because it got dark again. And like I said, I don't know what the timeline was, but just know it was a full day of bus ride. And went to the countryside, walked across the plank into a fishing boat that wasn't very large, and I think my best estimation is probably 100 people boarded that fishing boat. And we all climbed down into what I remember was basically a hole in like a wooden step ladder. We went down and just sat at the bottom of the boat, and there were no seats. It was just like a straw mat. We sat next to each other side by side, like cross-legged. Sort of, when I think back on it, sort of like when you see in the movies, like how, like slave ships and stuff. If that helps you imagine what it was like. So we were on the southern China Seas for, I think, 4 days and 4 nights. First night, everything, was okay, it was organized, and then by the second night, our boat was boarded and raided by Thai pirates. They're actually fishing boats, and they just saw another fishing boat that I think they knew what was going on. A lot of refugees leaving Vietnam, and they were taking all their belongings with them. So they knew some people were taking money and gold. So they boarded, ransacked the ship, basically took whatever valuables they could find. And so at that point, it was just chaos. Once that happened, there was just things being thrown all over the place, and when I say just chaos. And then, so that probably happened about another dozen times over the next two nights, 3 days, whatever. And it got to a point where by the 4th day we ran out of supplies. And from what I remember, the boat captain and the adults, they started looking for the pirates to let them ransack the ship, but then at the same time we can ask for water and a little bit of supplies that they would give us. And during one of the raids, my mom told me that one of the Thai pirate, like fishermen or pirates, whatever, took my sister, and they already took her to the other boat, and she was frantic and like distraught, and she went over to the boat and just basically begged and pleaded until they gave my sister back. And came back, and also at the time my mom was pregnant with about 5-6 months, I can't remember exactly, with my younger sister. So by the time we got to Malaysia, the Malaysian officials were basically saying, like, we're done receiving refugees, like we can't take any more. So boats would come in and they would tug them back out to sea. So to prevent that from happening, the people who ran the ship purposely sunk the ship, just so they can't tug us back out to sea. So once they did that, we got very little notice. Water was coming in, and people were just jumping overboard. And that was in the early hours in the morning. From what I remember, it was pitch black when we jumped off the boat. And again, my mom was 5-6 months pregnant. I had me. I was about 7 years old. My younger sister was 5, and my younger brother was 3. We all clung on to her and jumped off the boat together. Had no idea where we were jumping to, what we were jumping into, but it was just pitch blackness that we were jumping into. So, but once we hit the water, I just remember hitting the water, and somehow we made it to shore, and the daylight started coming in, and you start seeing people out on the beach. So after a while, we needed water, so people started digging wells near the beach, but it was all salt water, so we couldn't drink it. After a few hours, some of the Malaysian officials came and then basically rounded us up and took us to an island where they had all the refugees, basically a refugee camp. And it was, it's known as Pulau Bidong. It housed at one point like 30 to 40,000 refugees on the island. It's basically a deserted island. And even today it's there, and you could see remnants of the refugees that were there. But the locals basically called it Ghost Island because they believed there was a lot of ghosts on the island. And there were a lot of people that perished during that time. So just from starvation, sickness, you know, when you have that many people in a small place, you have a lot of sicknesses that pass around. So we were there for about a year, waiting for officials from different countries to come in and interview us and people to sponsor us to different countries. And that's how my family is pretty much split up all over the world. I have 3 uncles in Australia because their sponsors were from Australia, and we ended up in Maine because my aunt lived up in Maine and she got somebody to sponsor our family to the Augusta, Maine area. And we were there for about 2 months, and then we moved down to the Reading area because that's where most of my mom's side of the family was ended up, and also my dad's youngest brother, my uncle, was down here also. So, and at the time, there were 7 of us. You know, by this time, my younger sister was born. She was born in a refugee camp, and so by the time we came over, there was 6 of us in an immediate family, my grandfather, and then a family friend that traveled with us. But it was a harrowing experience for a year. So it's something that has, I think, affected me greatly, because it's always a point of reference for me. No matter how tough things are, I believe I can get through it, because I've gone through a year of toughness. You know, you see Survivor on TV, well, we did it for real. And during that time, it was in that refugee camp. We had no food, no running water. I was basically on the beach every day looking out for supply ships coming in and running home to tell my parents so that we could get in line to get supplies. So that was my year of being on the beach. So I didn't think that it would affect me as much as it did until I had kids, my own kids, and I realized what my parents went through to make sure that under those circumstances that all of us felt safe. We, as best as they could, provided food for us and shelter. I mean, we literally lived in a grass hut for a year. Those are pretty challenging conditions for parents to get 4 kids and with a newborn that was born in a refugee camp. So, and when we finally did come into this country, we went to Maine, and it was like total culture shock for us. We lived with our sponsor. They were great. They treated us so well. But like I said, it was culture shock. Like, we were from an area that was 90 degrees or 90% humidity. We were up in Maine in April. They had a lake that was behind the house. It was still frozen in April, and snow was still on the ground, and we just weren't used to that. So we eventually, when we moved down here, they didn't know, and there was also a language barrier. They didn't know why we moved down here until years later. We went back and visited with them and explained to them, and I think that closed a lot of issues for them, in their mind anyway. So when we came down to Reading, we didn't know anyone other than our immediate family, and I went to school in Reading, and pretty much everybody picked on us, because even the Vietnamese kids that were here earlier than us, by then they knew English. We didn't, my brothers and sisters, my siblings and I. So pretty much everybody picked on us, but we got through that, and I pretty much sat in the back of a classroom from, I think, 1st grade to about 3rd grade, not knowing any English, and there was no ESL classes. I don't think the teachers knew what to do with us, and we certainly didn't know what to do. So we were told that we had to go to school, and we just sat in the back of the classroom. So I started picking up English right around 3rd grade, and a lot of it I attribute to watching like Sesame Street and Electric Company, just learning English. So by about midway through 3rd grade, 4th grade, I felt I could speak and understand English pretty fluently by then. So, but like I said, it was one of those things where nobody knew what to do with us, and nobody knew how to teach us, because they didn't speak our language, and I'm sure they didn't have the resources either. But I think that's where I've learned to have some patience when I teach or explain things to people, and even my own kids, because I believe that, and I tell my kids this all the time, like, things are only hard when you don't know. Once you know it, it becomes easy. So just like when we didn't speak a word of English, understanding people was hard, but once we start understanding, it became easy. So I went through school in the Reading School District for about 2 years. Then we moved to suburbs of Reading and Mount Penn, and from 6th grade on, that's where we lived, and until I went to Widener. And then coming out of Widener, TPD was my first job, and I've been here ever since. This is my 27th year, and I've seen all the changes that TPD has gone through, and all the different people that have come through, and TPD has treated me great, and my family great. So I wouldn't be here today if I didn't have the support of everybody that I've met in my life, and TPD is a big part of it. And I think one of the lessons like I said, I keep going back to that time period when I was in that refugee camp. It was like even during COVID, that was my point of reference when everybody was, had all those concerns about the COVID virus. And I told my kids, I was like, well, just imagine if your dad went through school, had school the first 3 years of his life. Just imagine how smart he would be. But it's just one of those things where I think we don't know how strong we are until we're tested and pushed to our limits. And that's when we show our true strength. And when you get to those limits and you just keep going. And I think that's a good lesson for everyone, is when you have those difficult times, just don't quit, just keep going. And you'll get to a point where it'll be better. So, and everyone's gonna face some hardships. Like, very rarely that I've met people that haven't met those any kind of hardships. So, whatever you're going through, push through it, and you'll be okay. There was a lady that helped our family from one of the local churches, and her name was Doris Stapleton, and I won't forget her because she would check on us and made sure, like every holiday we got, like Easter we would get like a basket of candy or just little things like that, and it made us felt like we were important and loved. Because it was hard, like going through the school, especially when everybody was picking on you. Like when we had the Asian kids picking us, the Latinos, blacks, whites, like whatever. Like we were like the bottom of the totem, and even our own people, like Vietnamese people, Chinese, like picked on us because we didn't know English and we had less than them. Like we didn't shop at department stores, we would shop at Goodwill. My mom would go to the farmer's market and get the cuts of meat that the farmers were throwing away, and a lot of times they were giving out some of those like items, like fish heads they would throw away. My mom would take those and cook those and make food, and just because at the time both my parents were working minimum wage, because we came to this country, they didn't have any money on them, with $0, and didn't speak English, so there were a lot of barriers for them. We didn't have a car. My dad would walk 45 minutes to an hour to work instead of taking a bus, because he felt that, I think at the time it was like 25 cents or 35 cents for one-way trip to where he was working, and he added it up. He felt that he could get milk, cereal, like food for us if he would just walk to work instead of riding the bus, and that's what he did for a few years. And so with that, like, we came here in 1980. By 1983, they were able to buy a house in Mount Penn, and that's coming into this country with $0. And then by 91, when I graduated high school, they were able to put me through college, as well as my other 3 siblings. So for them, they gave up a lot for us, because we had a lot of we had a good business, like a family business back in Vietnam, that they gave up. They gave it to one of their friends, and who actually became very wealthy. So they gave a lot just with the hopes that their children would have a better future. Everything. And here's the first thing I remember was going to Maine and first day of school. You know those milk cartons that you have, the paper milk cartons? Well, I sat there and stared at it. I had no idea how to open that. I was trying to open that, couldn't figure it, and I was taking the fork, trying to rip it open, and those things are strong. So I couldn't get it open and I remember there was like a girl that sat next to me, and she just showed me how to open it, and it was easy then. And that's one of the things that, like I said, I take away a lot of lessons from back when I think back on it, like just like a small thing like that, like and I think about it, I'm like, if you don't know how to do something, it's very difficult until somebody shows you how to do it the correct way. And I think that translates to some of the stuff we do here at TPD, like when somebody doesn't know how to do something, somebody new, then if they're not getting it, then maybe it's on us to show them a way that they can understand it better. I initially went to school thinking I wanted to be a chemical engineer, and then I had freshman chem, and that changed. So then I started taking classes that I liked, and it just gravitated toward civil engineering. So I didn't know that I wanted to be a civil engineer. So it just happened that I took the class that I liked, and that's how I ended up choosing my major. Everything's been great here, and I'm proud to be working for a company like TPD.